ShalomYouTube.com. Today we will be responding to a video made by Adam something, I guess that's his internet name, on why he thinks skyscrapers are a bad idea, but I'm going to make the case on why I think skyscrapers are a great idea and why we should be building more of them, not less. So let us begin.
Skyscrapers are the symbol of wealth and modernity. They dominate the skyline to the point where they become intrinsic to a city's image. Investors, politicians, and the general public seem to be loving them. And why wouldn't they? Skyscrapers are big and shiny, usually at least, and a true status symbol. And I am here to ruin the fun and tell you why skyscrapers are actually pretty stupid and why we shouldn't build them. My view is that in 99.9% of the cases, you don't even need to go above 10 floors.
Okay, so here is the first problem with his idea. He says that skyscrapers are not needed in 99.9% of cases. Here's the problem with that. If this was really the case, we would see a lot less skyscrapers. If 10 floors was all that was needed in 99.9% of the cases, that would be what gets built, and yet plenty of buildings are taller than that. He mentions investors as one group that loves them. Well, if skyscrapers were a bad idea, less investors would be investing in them. It would be in the economic self-interest to build smaller buildings, and yet they don't. No matter what the cost per square foot is, something smaller is always going to be cheaper than something that's bigger and taller. And I'm not claiming that markets are like these perfectly rational things. I'm not claiming that economic systems are perfectly rational. I'm just saying simply that if skyscrapers were such a bad idea, I think we would see a lot less of them. That's just my take.
And so let's examine the main problems with skyscrapers that prevent them from being a good idea. Problem number one is their environmental impact, because turns out a big hunk of glass and metal is hard to cool or heat. And to quote this Guardian article about it, electricity use per square meter of floor area was nearly 2.5 times greater in high-rise office buildings, 20 or more stories, than in low-rises, 6 stories or less. The gas used for heating was about 40% more for tall buildings, and the total carbon emission from these buildings was twice as high. But hang on a second, you might say. It is entirely possible to build environmentally friendly skyscrapers that aren't just a big mass of steel and glass. To which I say, sure, but it still doesn't solve the second problem, cost.
Okay, so he says that skyscrapers are environmentally unfriendly, but then he contradicts himself and says you can build environmentally friendly skyscrapers, thus negating his own argument. Further, you can use wood frame mass timber construction to reduce the environmental impact of taller buildings. This is from science.org article, Would You Live in a Wooden Skyscraper? On a global scale, replacing steel used in construction with timber, such as CLT, would cut CO2 emissions by 15 to 20%, according to a 2014 study in the Journal of Sustainable Forestry. And according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, by some estimates, the near-term use of CLT and other emerging wood technologies in buildings 17 to 15 stories would have the emissions control effect as taking more than 2 million cars off the road for 1 year. So let us continue.
In general, the taller you build, the more expensive it gets. And this is a problem because that means affordable housing and affordable office space are out the window. If big investors put up a bunch of money to build a skyscraper, the first thing they will want is returns. And that usually doesn't mean affordable 1 or 2 room apartments. If the spreadsheet says high-end luxury condos equal most big number, then that's what's getting built. Meaning that for skyscrapers to meaningfully address the housing shortage and not just become a rich people tower, the state would need to step in. But the thing is, if we really put up an affordable residential skyscraper with state support, that still wouldn't eliminate problem number 3, alienation.
The next point he brings up is cost, and there's several things to unpack here. First, he claims that it's substantially more expensive to build taller buildings. Now, it is more expensive. It's not substantially so. So let's go here. Let's go to Montreal construction cost. So as we can see, for up to 12 stories, is only a little bit cheaper. It's $170 to $250 a square foot versus $13 to $39 a square versus $180 to $255 a square foot for 13 to 39 stories. So for roughly up to 40 stories, the construction cost per square foot is not going to be much larger than for up to 12 stories. So in other words, taller buildings are not substantially more expensive to construct on a per square foot basis. And then we have this building here. It's a 25-floor building. It's really tall. Very tall building. And according to this construction cost estimate, it was $253 per square foot. So if we actually look at real world construction costs, the construction costs are not substantially more expensive than low or mid-rise buildings. And then there's something else to consider. Even if high-rises are initially more expensive, thanks to filtering, they can become more affordable. Filtering is when new housing being built relieves pressure on existing housing, thus driving down prices. Thus, as long as land prices aren't inflated by green belts and developer fees aren't prohibitively expensive and there's an elastic supply of housing, high-rises should become affordable over time. So that's one thing you have to consider is high-rises are often built in markets where you have very expensive government regulations. If you didn't have them, they could be even cheaper than they are today. So for example, this 18-floor high-rise in Houston, Texas, it's only $141 a square foot, right? So in fact, that's actually cheaper than when I last found it. I last found it for $160 a square foot. This one right here is only $218 a square foot, even though it's in a really tall building. It's in a 17-floor high-rise. And just for reference, the average housing price in Houston is around, I think it's around $200 to $300 a square foot, depending on the market conditions, of course. Right, and this one right here, it's built in a 30-floor high-rise. It's only $235 a square foot. Very affordable, and you get lots of amenities. So even if high-rises start out on the higher end of the market, they can become affordable over time. High-rises can also be economical in other ways. For example, you can spread the cost of land around a greater number of units, thus reducing land cost per unit. A high-rise is better able to pay for things like elevators because the cost of an elevator is spread around a larger group of people. High-rises also enable higher quality housing. For example, Paris, 520 square feet per person, right? So not only can they be more economical, they can actually offer better housing, right? They can offer better housing than mid-rises. So because New York has taller buildings than Paris, the average New Yorker has access to 1,000 square feet of space, whereas the average Parisian only has 520 square feet of space. So not only can high-rises be economical, they can offer much better housing than other kinds of buildings can. And then, in some cases, high-rises are the only affordable option. This is a quote from a study called Returns to Scale in Residential Construction, the Marginal Impact of Building Height. In San Francisco, the BER per square foot is highest for 3-story construction and lowest for 12-story construction. These BERs translate to monthly rents exceed $4,358 and $2,333 for 1,000 square foot apartments. In other words, to get apartments to a reasonable price in San Francisco, you would need 12 floors, whereas most buildings in San Francisco today are only 3 floors, right? So the most affordable option for San Francisco and other expensive cities is high-rises. Let's see. And then this is a study from New York University cited by Yimbys that for every 10% increase in housing stock, rents will go down by 1%. And just think about how massive 10% increase in housing stock is. In places where land is constrained, the only way to get that much housing, the only way, is through much taller buildings, right? So to get housing prices down by a third, you would need a 300% increase in housing stock. And the only way you're going to do that is with high rises. And then here's a quote from economist Edward Glazer. He thinks that taller buildings are the only way we're going to get more affordability. See, in New York City, the price of building an additional square foot of living space on top of a tall building is less than $400. Prices do rise substantially in ultra-tall buildings, say over 50 stories, but for ordinary skyscrapers, it doesn't cost more than $500,000 to put up a nice new 1,200 square foot apartment. Land costs something, but in a 40-story building, a 1,200 square foot unit is only using 30 square feet of Manhattan, less than 1,000th of an acre. At those heights, land costs become pretty small. If there were no rules restricting new construction, then prices would eventually come down to somewhere near construction costs, about $500,000 for a new apartment. That's more than $200,000 that it costs to put up a nice 2,500 square foot house in Houston, but a lot less than the million or so that such an apartment costs now in New York. So the thing is, one reason people move to the suburbs is they want space, right? They want space. But a high-rise building can offer more space than many apartments can offer. So if you want people to move back to cities and to enjoy everything that big cities have to offer, then we need bigger units. And the key to that is taller buildings. High-rise construction is the key to taller, higher quality apartments. In Houston, for example, there are high-rise apartments that are as large as 1,500 square feet, which is a lot of space. So if our goal is more people to enjoy the benefits of big cities, then we need bigger, more spacious, more higher quality units. And that's what high-rises can offer. See, where am I in the, okay. And then there's the cost of an elevator, right? When you have an elevator, it becomes much more economical to build additional floors. This is from the book called Edge City. Residential structures either have to be less than 3 stories from above the entrance in order for you to build them without elevators, or they have to be high-rise. Once you start building a structure out of concrete and steel to accommodate an elevator, your costs kick in so much higher in orbit that you have to build vastly more dwelling units per acre to make any money. So high-rises are actually more economical than mid-rises once you consider the cost of an elevator. So let us go back.
That still wouldn't eliminate problem number 3, alienation. Because turns out living on the 50th floor makes it really difficult to socialize with people. Inside residential towers, there's rarely any meaningful social spaces. If you want any human contact, you have to go down to the park or something. But going down to the park from the 50th floor is not the same as going down to the park from the 5th floor. One takes 5 minutes and the other takes 15. The lack of quick and easy access to a social space promotes alienation. People will just stay in their apartments. They will not get to know each other. Here, the best case scenario is some people on the same floor kinda knowing each other. Whereas if you spread things out into a nice low-rise area with plenty of parks and public spaces between the buildings, people will spend more time there and socialize more, because getting to those places is no longer a hassle. Problem number 4 is logistics.
Okay, so he then brings up alienation. But is an elevator ride that time-consuming? I've been in modern elevators, and they could go up 40 floors in only a few minutes. So modern elevators can be quite fast, and innovations are making them even faster. Moreover, skyscrapers, by concentrating more stuff in an area, can support more amenities and things to do. Thus, your opportunity for connections with people actually increases. Moreover, when people go to big cities, they go to where the buildings are tallest, and you have the most concentration of activity. If anything, having a lot of stuff nearby can be overwhelming, and thus may make people want privacy. Though a skyscraper can offer privacy because you can use higher quality building materials and have better sound insulation and things like that. The skyscrapers don't alienate people, they enable greater connections to other people by putting more stuff in one place. To quote Edward Glaeser, cities are the absence of physical space between people and companies. They are they are proximity, density, closeness. So are skyscrapers alienating? This is more subjective, but I'm going to have to disagree. So let's go to here.
Problem number 4 is logistics. If you focus a lot of people in a small area, public infrastructure has to keep up somehow. Aside from the need of gigantic parking lots and high-capacity public transit, you also need to build out stuff like daycare centers, elementary schools, high schools, retail, public amenities, and you also need to scale this up for tens of thousands of people. And if you have a bunch of office towers, you will end up with an area that is extremely busy during work hours, but otherwise it's completely deserted. And so, for me, these are the 4...
Okay. Let's see. So he complains that skyscrapers require lots of stuff. However, this is the wrong way of looking at it. The skyscraper gives you more choice by enabling more stuff to be in a walking radius. Thus, you can have 20 restaurants instead of 2, or having to drive 20 minutes to a strip mall. The need for high-capacity transit, I fail to see how this is a problem. This is a good thing. High-capacity transit is the kind of transit people will actually want to use. Having lots of stuff in an area means that area is easier to service by transit because more stuff is in a walking radius of the transit stop. His whole channel is about promoting mass transit and reducing car use, while concentrating a lot of stuff in an area and providing that area with high-capacity transit, like say an elevated railway or subway, will do a lot to encourage transit and reduce car usage. So from this paper, making the most of transit, density, employment growth, and ridership around new stations. Accordingly, employment densities at trip destinations affect ridership more than residential densities at trip origins. And then this is from new open source analysis of transit job access and transit ridership, found a very strong relationship between transit ridership and employment density. Converting that association into an elasticity, if the number of jobs accessible within 30 minutes were to increase by 1%, average stop level ridership would increase by 0.6 to 0.8%. And then he talks about central business districts and how they'll be dead after working hours. Here's the thing, as long as that place has other stuff than offices, it won't be dead after work hours. Many city centers have things like museums, live theaters, high-end shopping, clubs, nightlife, and other things to do. For example, even though Manhattan has lots of office towers in it, it also has Broadway, Times Square, world-class restaurants, and many other things to do. In Japan, arcade game centers are often located in city centers. To ensure that transit is used for things other than work stuff, you should ensure there's stuff there other than offices. If you have jobs, services, and things to do concentrated in one place, then those things will be easy to access with transit, and they won't be just for commuters and dead after working hours. So his whole shtick, his whole thing is that we should drive less and use public transit more. Well, guess what? Putting more things in skyscrapers will make it more possible for people to both drive less and for people to use public transportation more. So he of all people, should be in favor of skyscrapers.
So, for me, these are the 4 main problems with skyscrapers. They are energy intensive, unaffordable, they alienate you from other people, and they're quite a logistical headache. Now, in the beginning, I've mentioned that I don't think there's any need to build anything taller than 10 stories in 99.9% of cases. And so let me show you why. This is the Burj Khalifa. It is 828 meters tall and has 163 floors. According to its fact sheet, it has 172,000 square meters of residential space and 28,000 square meters of office space. So these numbers sound pretty impressive, right? That's a lot of residential and office space. And so I present to you this building. It's the so-called faluház or village house in Budapest, the biggest prefab concrete residential block in Hungary from the 70s. The name Village House comes from the fact that this thing houses as many people as an entire village. It has more than 3,000 inhabitants in 884 apartments. It's a 10-story building with a total residential floor space of 43.5 thousand square meters. And so this right here is the plot on which the Burj Khalifa stands. On it we could easily fit 5 entire village houses. And if we turn 4 of them into residential blocks and 1 of them into an office, we get 174,000 square meters of residential space, 2,000 more, and 43.5 thousand square meters of office space, or 15.5 thousand square meters more. In other words, 5 10-story tall commie blocks was all it took to beat the world's tallest skyscraper. And that should really tell us something. So to reiterate,
Okay, so he wants to compare the world's tallest skyscraper to random commie blocks. Adam then compares the Burj Khalifa with some random building from Eastern Europe. However, the Burj Khalifa isn't indicative of commercial skyscrapers. The Burj Khalifa wasn't designed to provide a lot of space, rather it was a national monument designed to be the world's tallest building. Most skyscrapers will have a lot more space than that. So all things being equal, a taller building will provide more space than a shorter one. Of course, you have to take into account lot size, floor area ratio, and lot coverage. For example, this 10-story building only provides 175,000 square feet of office space. Right, this is a 10-story building, 175,000 square feet of office space. Whereas this 37-floor building provides 730,000 square feet of office space, almost 7 times as much. Right, so 730,000. So it's 3.7 times as tall, but provides almost 7 times as much. This One World Trade Center is 95 floors, but provides a whopping 2.8 million. Let's see, 2.8 million. So it's not in this article, but it provides 2.8 million. 3.5 million square feet of office space. So, and then this Two World Trade Center provides 82 floors and 2.8 million square feet of office space. And then we can compare job densities by city. If we look at Midtown Manhattan, because Midtown Manhattan has a lot of skyscrapers, it has 1 million jobs in 7 square kilometers. And that's a job density of roughly 158,000 jobs per square kilometer. The Chicago Loop, 4.9 square kilometers, 413,000 jobs, or 84,000 jobs per square kilometer. Philadelphia, 2.2 square kilometers, and roughly 191,000 jobs, or 86,000 jobs per square kilometer. And then this is, and so I get that data from, let's see, the spatial structure of U.S. metropolitan employment. And then this is from Alon Levy. Contrary to the common European belief that high-rises don't add density, the mid-rise character of most European CBDs leads to a real limit on their ability to agglomerate. The job densest arrondissement of Paris, the second, has 60,000 jobs in a square kilometer. Midtown Manhattan has 800,000 jobs in 4 square kilometers. And according to Demography's International Central Business District data, Central Business District and Business District data, section Employment Density in International Central Business Districts, ranked by density, the job densest area of Paris proper as of 1990 has 35,000 jobs per square kilometer, whereas La Défense has 90,000. So places with skyscrapers have more density than places that don't have them. That's my point. In other words, European cities have less job densities than many American cities do because the American cities have skyscrapers.
Skyscrapers can only be used for two things really, office space and residential space, and they're kinda bad at both of those.
No, they can be used for more than office space and residential space. See. For example, this really tall mall, this building is 72 floors, but 8 of its floors are retail space. This mall is 22 floors. It's a really tall building and it has lots of retail in it. This warehouse is a whopping 22 floors tall, and again, it's not office or residential space. And then this building right here, this is a hospital. This one has a whopping 28 floors, and this one has 25 floors. So in fact, taller buildings can be used for office, residential, retail, hotels, medical. They can even be used for industrial jobs, retail. And in fact, this is from Productivity and the Density of Economic Activity. Using data on gross state output, the authors find that doubling employment density increases average labor productivity by around 6%. More than half of the variance in output per worker across states can be explained by the density of economic activities.
For residents, skyscrapers are like any other apartment building basically, but with the added disadvantages of living very high above the ground. And the view might be nice, but trust me, it gets old really quickly.
Only according to you.
And for office workers, skyscrapers are, well, let's just say that COVID-19 has shown us that we don't need so much goddamn office space. Because turns out most of us can work on our computers just as easily from home as we can in the office. And considering how most offices nowadays are the open plan hellscapes, except for your bosses, I think this is a change for the better. You know, I really do think that skyscrapers are just this big, dumb, afterthought kind of solution to the very real problem of lack of housing stock and office space in major urban settlements. But then why not start elsewhere?
Okay, so according to him, COVID-19 has shown us that we don't need so much damn office space. Except the reality is that workers are returning to the office and more office space is being built. Roughly 88% of companies are making workers return to the office. Overall, 88% of employers are using incentives to get employees back to the office. He says because you can work from your computer that we don't need offices. But just because we don't need so much office space. Just because you can do something at home doesn't mean that doing it at home is the best way to do things. The reality is no matter how good communications get, it will always... No matter how good communications get, it will always have delays and never be as good as doing things in person. Moreover, being stuck at home for 8 hours can be really boring. He complains about open floor hellscapes, but one reason companies have adopted open floors was a lack of space. Building more space like skyscrapers would actually help address this. For example, you can shop online, but people still buy stuff in person. And this is why Class A malls are thriving. People have been talking about the death of malls, but the death of malls is only true of smaller, lesser malls. Class A malls are thriving and growing. You could do education online entirely, but most students, including me when I was one, overwhelmingly prefer to do it in real life. You can watch movies or plays at home, but people still go to movie theaters and live action theaters for plays. You can listen to music at home or on a portable music device on the go, but people still go to concerts. People still go to restaurants, even though you can order food online and have it delivered. Real life simply has too many advantages, and these advantages, the density, proximity, and closeness that Edward Glaser describes, enables us to take full advantage of these things, which is one reason why we need more skyscrapers, not less of them. And that brings me back to my original point. You know, higher job densities make us more productive. And by making us, and to be more productive, to get these higher job densities, we need to do stuff in real life in order to make this happen. So his solution is incorrect. And then we see more offices being built, like an 18-floor building in Tempe, Arizona. a 37-floor building in Century City, a 78-story building in Manhattan. And in fact, 50 Hudson Yards has been the most profitable office building that they've been building. So not only is more office space being built, it's the kind of office space that he thinks is not necessary. Skyscrapers.
Why not do intelligent
Okay.
better? You know, I really do think that skyscrapers are just this big, dumb, afterthought kind of solution to the very real problem of lack of housing stock and office space in major urban settlements. But then why not start elsewhere? Why not do intelligent, complex urban planning and eliminate instances of wasteful use of public space? Cars, for example, are a huge waste of space. They take up lots of space and they spend 90% of their lifetime parked. So what if, instead of building a skyscraper, we began by reducing the number of cars in the city and built some medium-sized apartment blocks on the now vacant gigantic parking lots? What if we reduced and regulated short-term lease services like Airbnb? Because that alone can occupy a huge part of the housing stock in any major settlement. As you can see, when it comes to handling housing shortages and lack of space in major cities, there's a myriad of other points where we can start that are easier and more effective. Oh, and they also don't cost as much as building a skyscraper. So this would be my case against them. I'm not completely opposed to the idea though, but I think they should be considered only if we have exhausted all the other previous available options. I think that would lead to much better outcomes, both for people and for cities. Thank you for watching.
Okay, so Adam's alternative. His idea is that we take space away from cars. Here's the problem with that idea. Not every city is devoting tons of space to cars. How would you build more housing or office space in places like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, Seattle, Toronto, London, San Francisco, or big cities in India? All these places have acute shortages of housing but devote very little space to cars, as people drive a lot less there. Moreover, parking spaces are private property in most places. You can't just press delete on them because the real world isn't SimCity. If your goal is to reduce the space given to cars, then you need something that can generate sufficient foot traffic to reduce the need for parking. Thus, to have successful mixed-use development, you need tall buildings to generate enough foot traffic to replace parking. So here's an article about a transit-oriented development, and basically it didn't have enough density to support the amount of retail space. So because it was only 6 stories, it could only support 5,000 square feet of retail space, but it had roughly 34,000 square feet. So in other words, this project would have had to have been 7 times the density to support the retail space without any parking, right? So you can't just get rid of parking. Businesses have parking because they need people to get to their businesses. In order to reduce the amount of parking, you need something that can generate enough foot traffic to replace a lot of parking. So this building would have needed 7 times the residential density to make that happen. Plus, even if there's space for mid-rises or other missing middle housing, that doesn't mean it will be economically viable, as you have to take into account things like the price of land and teardown costs. Housing in San Francisco is overwhelmingly missing middle, low rises, and mid-rises that people like Adam want, and yet it's super expensive. If you wanted to make San Francisco more affordable, you would either need high rises or open up Marin County to greenfield development, or both. Missing middle housing would be viable in either the suburbs as grayfield development or as greenfield development, but not viable in big cities that are already dense and have acute housing shortages. If you want to tackle housing shortages in places with high land prices, high rises are absolutely necessary, and some degree of greenfield is needed to address general affordability, but I will touch on that in another video. He brings up Airbnb. However, Airbnb largely serves the same market as hotels, so getting rid of it would require building enough hotel space to meet the demand it serves, and building taller buildings can help do that. And just because you ban Airbnb doesn't mean the demand goes away. So you can't just regulate away demand. The demand's still going to be there even if you ban Airbnb. So this video's been kind of long, and I'm sorry for the length, but there was a lot of information in there. And so I hope you all enjoyed this video. I put a lot of effort into it. I'm Thomas Christensen. I hope you all have a wonderful day.